Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Habits of Effective Muslims. This is a series of lectures based on the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Now, the author has written this book in order that the reader may find greater success in various aspects of his life, such as his family life, his financial life, or his professional life. However, you find that when we apply these habits to our most important life, that is our spiritual life, that these are some of the same habits that have been taught to us by the prophets and the imams. And sometimes it is useful to look at contemporary expressions and modern examples of Islamic principles in order to help us implement them into our lives. In fact, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ once said that wisdom is the lost property of the believer, so he should take it wherever he finds it. And this saying recognizes the fact that all wisdom and knowledge originates from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we shouldn't discard it just because it comes from someone who is outside of our faith. So inshallah, the following lectures cover topics such as being proactive, planning, learning to communicate, thinking win-win, understand, then being understood, and synergy. So in this introduction, in order to prepare ourselves to adopt new habits and to help us along the path of getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to cover a few points first. And the first of those is, why do we act? Or what motivates us? Sometimes we act only for the reward, because there's something in it for us. I go to work in order to receive a paycheck. At other times, we act only out of fear of punishment. I follow the law because I don't want to get sent to jail. And at other times, we're acting out of love. And we'll find that this is the best of actions. If we apply these points to the idea of gaining knowledge, for example, someone may go to university and earn a degree, and their only goal is to have a good career in order to earn lots of money. This is acting for the reward. Now, another person is motivated to go to school because of fear. Their fear of what their parents may do to them if they don't get up and go to school. They may be afraid of a social stigma. But a third person knows the inherent value of knowledge. And that person knows that knowledge increases by spending, whereas wealth decreases by spending. Now let us apply these concepts to our worship of Allah. One person may worship Allah only for the reward. And Imam Ali says, this is the worship of a businessman. This person says, "Oh Allah, I've prayed all day and all night. What kind of reward can I get?" Another person worships only out of fear. And Imam Ali says that this is the worship of a slave, someone who can't think or act for themselves. A slave doesn't care about his master. He doesn't care about what tasks he's doing. He only wants to accomplish it in order that he avoids being punished. But the third type of person worships Allah out of love and knows that Allah is worthy of his worship because it is the right thing to do. They hate being far from Allah because they recognize the extent to which Allah's mercy surrounds them. And according to Imam Ali, this is the type of worship that makes us free. So the next concept is that of a paradigm shift. And a paradigm is a model. It's a theory or perception. It's how we see the world. It's a type of outlook or how the world should be. Oftentimes we tend to think that our paradigms are always correct. And if we experience a problem or difficulty in life, that the problem is out there. It's with someone else. It's with the rest of the world, not us. We can be so convinced that our perception is correct that in fact both you and I can be looking at the same picture, yet see two completely different things. Many things go into defining our paradigms. Some of those things may be our culture. A big problem in our communities is that some people confuse their culture with religion. the way we were brought up, the way our parents raised us, the languages that we speak, or the generation that we belong to. It's important to recognize these things because the more we become aware of how we have been influenced by our culture, by our experience, by our environment, the more we are aware of our paradigms and the more able we are to change them. An example of an individual who went through a dramatic paradigm shift in his life, Malcolm X. At one point, he belonged to an organization that had a distorted view of the religion of Islam and preached the ideology that white people were inherently evil. In fact, they were thought to be devils. And if you've read the autobiography of Malcolm X, it's not hard to understand how this idea seemed appealing based on his experience with white racist individuals throughout his life. However, in his life, he had the opportunity to go on the Hajj, where he was able to experience for the first time brotherhood with people of all different skin colors and races. When he went on the Hajj, the world did not change, but his outlook of the world began to change. And he came to the conclusion that if true Islam could do that for them, then maybe Islam was the solution to the race problem in America. So when he came back to America, he began to embrace all people and work to spread Islam, and eventually he became Shaheed in the path of Allah. Another example of a paradigm shift. In the Holy Quran, in the 18th chapter, Surat Al-Kahf, it details Prophet Musa's encounter with a more knowledgeable prophet, Taliya ibn Malik, or you may know him by the name Khidr alayhi salam. And Khidr in fact comes from the Arabic word meaning green. And according to a tradition from Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salam, the reason that he is called Khidr is because one of his signs is that wherever he sat upon the earth, that piece of earth would become fertile and green. So Nabi Musa was on a journey to meet this learned man, and we know from the Quran that he wanted to learn from his knowledge. So Khidr agrees to take Musa on his journey, but tells him, you won't be able to have patience with what I am doing. In other words, your paradigms won't apply to my task. So don't ask me any questions until I speak about it first. So Nabi Musa agrees, and on their journey, we know from reading the Quran that they experience 3 different incidences. Khidr damages a boat, he strikes a boy and he kills him, and they repair a wall in a town where they were unwelcomed. Each one of these events was unsettling to Nabi Musa, as the first 2 were seemingly acts of munkar, evil acts, and the third was an act of kindness towards the people who were not deserving. However then, Khidr tells Nabi Musa that I warned you, you would not be able to have patience with my actions. But before they separate, he explains the meaning of what he did. So the damaging the boat, of course, was a way of protecting it, because it belonged to 2 poor fishermen, and the ruler at the time was taking anything valuable by force, not unlike some of our governments do today. So the act of damaging it was actually an act of protecting it, because once the ruler had moved on, they could go ahead and repair the boat and use it to make a living. It is said in the traditions that the child that was killed had the mark of being a kafir, a disbeliever, and his parents were righteous servants. And the fear was that he would cause his parents grief and eventually cause them to lose their faith. So Allah willed that he be replaced by a more righteous child. And we know from the traditions that it's mentioned this child was replaced with a daughter. And from that daughter descended 70 prophets. Finally, the last incident, the wall that they repaired, underneath that wall was a treasure that had been buried by the parents of 2 orphans in the city. It was left for them in order that they may find it when they reached full age, when they became older. And unless the wall was put into repair, they wouldn't have been able to access it. So we can say that Prophet Musa experienced a paradigm shift. The next idea to discuss is principles versus practices. So practices are the things that we do, while principles are the things that we believe. They are the reasons that we do the practices. So anyone can perform a practice, yet if there's no guiding principle behind it, then that practice becomes useless. So let's inshallah look at some examples. Take an example such as learning, which usually is seen as something good, right? Something honorable, something we all should engage in. But if there's no principle behind learning or how we're going to use that knowledge, isn't it true that sometimes knowledge without principles can be even worse than ignorance? Giving charity is usually seen as a good deed. But what's important in that is your intention when you give that charity. Because sometimes a person can give charity for selfish reasons, to make himself look good, to make himself look generous in front of the people, or he can do it in hiding, in private, so that his intention is solely for the purpose of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure. Marriage, a topic that's very much being discussed in the media today. We see it as being a spiritual union that's intended to guide us closer to Allah. That's part of our worship. So much so that being married is half of our deen. So we have to ask, how can we intend to get closer to Allah if our marriage violates His laws? So it's the principle behind marriage that we have to look at. And each practice gets its importance from a principle. Likewise, in Islam, we have 5 beliefs or 5 principles called usuluddin, or the roots of religion. These are Tawheed, the oneness of Allah; justice, belief in the prophets and imams, that Allah has sent prophets and imams to guide us, and that there will be a day of judgment, a day when we all stand up and take account for everything that we've done in our lives. And we can see that these 5 beliefs are linked to practices. Practices known as the furu'uddin, or the branches of Islam. And those branches are salat, fasting, khums, zakat, a type of charity, going on the hajj, jihad, commanding the good and forbidding the evil, loving and obeying the prophets and imams, and staying away from the enemies of Islam. And just like a tree has to establish its roots before sprouting branches, these beliefs must be firmly planted in our hearts before they can bear fruit. Developing new habits requires 3 important steps. And one of them is, you must have the knowledge. You must know what to do, such as praying. Allah in the Quran tells us that we have to pray, so we know what to do. Next is having the skill, or knowing how to do something. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam teaches us the correct way how to pray. And most importantly, one must have the desire to begin a new habit. And inshallah, may Allah instill in all of our hearts the desire to make changes in our lives. And inshallah, hasten the coming of the 12th Imam, Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, and make us amongst his righteous followers.